Well, today I want to share with you something that's absolutely fascinating to me, and I hope it's really, really fascinating to you too. And that's how our physical alignment directly affects our mental alignment, and vice versa. There's a constant conversation between the two. So, our physicality, our physical alignment can affect our mindset, our confidence, and even our connection with our horses. And people say things like, your body tells the story. I know my grandma always used to say, every picture tells a story. And she was usually saying it as she was trying to lever herself out of a chair. There's even a book, isn't there? You may have heard of it, you may have read it. The Body Keeps the Score. But, few people realize that this is true right down to the level of your nervous system, how your posture and even your emotions can be stored in specific places outside of your mind. So you might realize, you might have heard, you might have read that emotions are stored in various parts of our brains, in physical areas within the brain. But emotions can also be stored virtually anywhere in the body. And that's a curious thing to think about, but you hear it in people's language. They say things like, that person is a pain in the neck. And that's because there's an emotion evoked when they see that person. And it may speak of the fact that person evokes the emotion in their neck. And there's lots of other idioms in English, and I'm sure in every other language, that tell us where the emotion is or could possibly be coming from or going to. So our bodies and our minds aren't separate. They're constantly in dialogue. Every emotion is reflected in our posture. And you know this, you can see people and they may look very confident, they may look very non-confident, they may look very happy, they may look sad, and we're doing a bit of a mind read by guessing what they're feeling, but we know from that posture, because we've probably held it ourselves, what that means. Our breathing is also very reflective of our emotions and even our muscle tone. And when we experience stress or fear or anxiety, our body creates tension patterns. Just like if you think a certain thought daily, eventually your brain creates that as a pattern. And so these patterns become habits, and they can become physical habits that literally pull the body out of alignment. So for riders, this might mean one hip is slightly higher than the other, one shoulder is dropping forward maybe a little bit more than the other, or maybe your pelvis just rotates just a touch one way. And what's very fascinating is that these physical imbalances don't just reflect a physical or emotional stress, they create stress signals to the brain. So the body is telling the brain, by holding this tension, if you like, somewhere in the body, we're not safe. And then the brain reinforces that feeling. So consciously, people say all the time, I'm fine, but your body's physiology may still be in fight or flight mode. And one of the most powerful examples of the mind-body connection is a very well-known one. It's the psoas muscle, sometimes called the muscle of the soul. So it's a muscle that connects your spine to your upper thighs, but it kind of winds round and it supports your pelvis, and it supports your seat and your core. But it's also got a lot to do with our emotional state as well. So when the psoas is tight or it's shortened, it's sending constant messages to the brain that we are somehow under threat. So unbeknownst to us sometimes, that is the trigger for anxiety or restlessness or just a sense of unease, even when you don't quite know why. Now, many other areas of our bodies can hold such emotions or stresses that again signal to the brain that there's something that we need to be wary of, or that there's some reason why we're not 100% safe. For example, the diaphragm. We may not be breathing correctly. And so that's something that when you're scared, you may even not be aware of. But emotions and that breath are very, very evocative of our state of mind. The hips, which some people associate with being in control or a fear or a symptom of letting go, they are also able to quite easily hold old emotions. The jaw and the neck are big ones as well. How many times do you think to yourself during the day, oh gosh, my jaw is actually quite stiff? And sometimes that is literally because we've spent the day biting back words, or we've been holding tension. The shoulders, this one's mine, definitely. I need to loosen my shoulders, particularly my right shoulder. But the shoulders can carry invisible weight or responsibility. So each and every part of our body has that potential to hold tension. And the tension may have occurred years ago. We've not quite got rid of it. The reason for that tension, the emotion or the event that caused us to feel the tension, the stress, whatever it might have been. But we've got this lingering physicality that means we're slightly misaligned. Sometimes these alignments aren't even felt in the body. So, it's not that, for instance, I know my right shoulder always seems to get out of alignment, but I'm sure there's lots and lots of other bones and organs and nerves and tendons and ligaments and blood vessels and you name it that are possibly not in full alignment in my body. And it's the same for all of us. So when we realign the body, when these areas go back to their optimal alignment and move as they're meant to do, riders report an emotional release or a sense of calm. Sometimes it brings on a certain amount of clarity as well. And this is why I've been studying the Tucker Biokinetic Technique. So recently, in the past week or so, got a new certification. So it's a TBT, Tucker Biokinetic Technique, Functional Alignment Specialist certification. Bit of a mouthful, but very, very exciting because it enables me not only to help the horses, but to help people as well. So I've started a new Facebook page, which I'll put into the description if you're interested at all, so that you can see my journey and horses' journeys and people that I interact with, what their journeys are. Because TBT isn't just about having a good posture, it's about aligning all the structures of the body, including neural realignment. So what's been so interesting for me on this particular course, we learned tons and I'm still learning. I'm going back over some of the videos and the information, but that you can realign your emotions and realign horses' emotions. I find that just incredible, amazing. And I've done it with my own horse. Anyone who knows me knows that my horse, Darcy, was very, very anxious at times. And I did a little bit of work on structures in her brain, structures that I'm going to mention in just a moment. And we went out in the wind, and I was long reining. We're still long reining. I'm not up to riding yet, but she could go all over the place and just, notice things moving, but not pay so much attention that she had to flee and fling herself across the school. So our body's alignment does affect key emotional and regulatory centers in the brain. So the amygdala, are tiny little almond-shaped structures in the brain. We've got 2 of them, and they process fears and threats, quite high-level emotions. Then we've got the hippocampus, which is always thought to be in the shape of a kind of seahorse. I'm not sure it's a seahorse, but that's where it gets its name from. Hippocampus is Latin for seahorse. And this is about memory and learning. So we can learn to be anxious. We can really remember times of being anxious, and we can call it into our memories if we really wanted to do. And so can horses. And then the hypothalamus, which governs a whole series of neurochemicals, peptides and such, that I'm trying to get the biochemistry right now, and I'm so hung up because as an ex-biochemist, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but at the same time I'm saying you can't say that, Tracey, that's inaccurate. The hypothalamus starts, I suppose we would say, a cascade of reactions that leads to production of the stress hormones. So when your physical alignment is off, and again we could say in horses as well, this happens to them, and dogs and cats and everything else, those structures in the brain are constantly being fed a kind of distorted input. Even if the incident, the event is gone, maybe we've dealt with it, but we haven't dealt with it physically. So it's a little bit like, I bet it's a bit like me, getting my mobile phone out and trying to shoot a video and trying to hold the camera steady. My videos are always a bit wobbly. And so that's what it's like. We're kind of sending this wobbly picture, this wobbly data to our brain structures. But when we realign the body with the TBT and we realign the brain, we're not just straightening the muscles and the bones, we're actually restoring the feedback to the brain. And then these structures that deal with the emotions and the memories and the learning and so on, they settle. And the hypothalamus stops saying, we need more cortisol, we need more stress hormone. And so it stops that cascade. And that's why riders, and I imagine horses, feel lighter, clearer, calmer. And if you've had TBT on your body, but not necessarily on your horse, then obviously this is just going to be so much nicer for the horse too. But if you could have both of you realigned, imagine the power in that. So think about it. Your horse isn't necessarily responding to what you're saying, but what your body communicates, just like your brain also is very, very alert to what your body is saying. So if your alignment is saying, I'm asymmetrical or I'm a little bit misaligned, even imperceptibly, it isn't that one shoulder is 10 centimeters higher than the other, but it's imperceptible to our eyes and our touch and our proprioception, but If that alignment is saying tension, uncertainty, we need to be very protective of ourselves, then obviously your horse will feel that. So that, again, this is really fascinating to me. Imagine somebody who's a calm rider and they get on their horse and they're still calm. But something in their body has trapped an emotion that says tension. And it says, there's a threat. And then if we can then get rid of that in a rider's body, because their brain is working, they're a confident rider. But if we can also send that to the body and to any brain centers that may have got misaligned, then we're talking some powerful stuff here. So next time you feel a little bit tense, and this may be in your riding, but it may just be in general life. In fact, as long as you're not driving or working any machinery or anything at the moment, if you're just sitting at your desk, or you're maybe just on a train, or you're mucking out, just check in to your physical as well as mental status. Where are you holding tension? What might your body be trying to tell you? What emotion might be stored there that's ready to be released? Because when your body is in functional alignment, your mind naturally finds balance. So it's not to be forced. It's something that, it emerges when the system is safe and it's integrated. So if this is resonating with you, then you may be a little bit curious about experiencing a TBT session, whether for you or your horse or for both. And I haven't quite got a website going yet. It is in the pipeline. I've got a tiny amount on my current NLP website. But yeah, the Facebook page and the Instagram are up and running, and I'm just starting to trickle out a few posts. I'm not terribly active at the moment, but it will give you a little bit more information. Of course, you can always contact me and see if this is something that you're really interested in. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope that has proved food for thought. Take care, and I'll see you again really soon.